Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Life of a Rebel. And today with me, I have Babba Rivera, who is the founder and the CEO of Ceremonia, a clean hair care brand rooted in Latinx heritage, which I'm also very, very proud to be an investor in. Babba previously owned her own brand marketing agency, ByBabba, and I'm really, really grateful to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So I want to start off at the beginning. I want to start off with your childhood. I'm curious, what was that like, and what did your parents do for a living growing up? Was there sort of an entrepreneurial philosophy in the household? Tell me a bit about that.
So my parents are from Chile, but I grew up in Sweden. So they emigrated in the 80s during the Pinochet dictature. My dad was a hairdresser back in Chile, very fitting with what I'm doing today. But unfortunately, he was not able to get a job in Sweden due to the language barrier. And my mom, she never really had a career. So she would, do like cleaning homes and schools. And even that was hard to get a job in because of the language barrier. So I just grew up with, my two parents doing their best and, not speaking the language, relying on me a lot to be their translator. And yeah, I have like really weird memories of going to the bank with my dad and like reading the paperwork and, being like, you should sign here.
How old were you at that point?
Like 8.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, hopefully you knew a little bit about, what he was signing but it does sound like there was very much a culture of hard work in the household. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. And definitely like a fearless culture. I mean, it's pretty fearless to leave your country for the unknown to begin with. And they definitely didn't leave, Chile to come to like a fabulous setup in Sweden. They came as like refugees and had to seek asylum and did not speak the language, and Sweden is really cold and dark, and people are not super friendly to people that look different than you. So, it was definitely a huge sacrifice, and I think I subconsciously have seen that. Like, I don't think I realized that as a child. I realize it now, what a sacrifice they made. But I think it does something to you subconsciously, and it's made me very determined to make it sort of worthwhile, like for it to be worth it.
When I ask people, what are some of the questions I should ask you, the concept of marketing came up a lot, which is interesting because if you think about, one of the like most challenging areas for any entrepreneur, any new entrepreneur, or even more of an experienced entrepreneur is marketing. And I'm curious, what inspired you to go into marketing in the first place? How did you transition from, this idea of working in a house, of being in a household where there's a lot of hard work happening, to deciding, hey, I actually want to go and spend some time understanding this idea of marketing?
I grew up, pre-social media. So I just remember trying to figure out what I wanted to be. And I had really good grades. I had a lot of options for what I wanted to study. And I had all the options in the world, but very little insight into what my options actually were. So I remember I was working in an eyewear store, and this was just to pay for my studies. It was on the side of like a side hustle. And one day this guy comes in to show us the new collection or the upcoming collection of one of my favorite brands in the store. And it was called a trunk show. And I was like, what is a trunk show? And I remember asking all these questions. I was like, sorry, can I ask you, what is a trunk show? And he's like, oh, it's when we're showing the upcoming collections. And I thought his job seemed so fun. He was like, telling the story of this brand and showing the collection and taking orders and getting it in the media. And it was like so interesting to me. So I remember asking him, I was like, sorry, can I just ask you, like, what is your job? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, no, but like, what is this? And he's like, it's like sales and marketing. And after that, I literally went and Googled sales and marketing studies. So I sort of ended up in marketing by coincidence.
It's interesting because you can have the greatest product in the world, but without marketing, no one even knows what it is or how it's going to affect them and how it's going to add value to their life. And so I've always sort of viewed marketing and storytelling in such a connected way. And it's been my life's work as well, in sort of trying to get the story of, okay, I mean, at its very core, Shopify is a piece of software, but what you can do with that piece of software is basically anything. You can change your life, you can change the world. And that's where I always sort of marketing as this, even combining it with other disciplines is almost doesn't give it enough credit, which is that it's a way for other people to understand what the thing is. So tell me a bit about your time at Uber, which is, I know it was sort of early on in your career, but working at Uber at a very early stage in a country where they're trying to expand to, what were some of the big lessons or takeaways you have from that first experience?
I mean, that was such a crazy time. I was super young, had no idea what I was getting myself into. I sometimes joke that I got the job not because I was like the best candidate for it, but because I was the most naive one. I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that.
Everyone else is like, no, forget it. Like, I'm no way I can do this. Right.
Exactly. And honestly, I think that has been my superpower, being sort of naive in a good way. Like, obviously you have to be realistic sometimes, but I had an amazing journey with Uber. I ended up working there for 4 years, and in many ways I felt like I was an entrepreneur within the company. I did not have a boss for the first 8 months. I was basically just like put in this like satellite office, and they were like, go and hit your metrics, see you later. And we totally crushed it. Stockholm became the fastest growing market for Uber at the time. Being a good performer in a data-driven company is like the best place to be, because even though I was in this tiny, tiny satellite office, because of the numbers, my name popped up in rooms. So then our like VP of operations, Ryan Graves, he flew into Sweden and was talking to me and my partner, Martin. He was like, whatever you guys are doing, I'm ready to write it down. Like, what's happening here? He's like, tell me.
In order to share with other geographies, I suppose, right?
Exactly. So then we started hosting these like summits in different parts of the world. And eventually that led to a relocation to the US, to New York. And obviously I fell in love with New York. So I'm still here. And I think after 4 years, I started to feel like I had hit the glass ceiling a couple of times within the company. And I also felt like the best part of my journey with Uber was when I felt like I was building. And then it came to a point where I was more so maintaining. And I think that's when I started to think about my next step, and eventually left to join another startup.
So you decide after Uber to go somewhere else, and at the time I know it wasn't a big deal, but you went on to the direct to consumer luggage company Away, which is so well known right now. And I'm curious about that shift from selling and marketing a service to selling and marketing a product, and how you kind of think about those two different types of delivery. Yeah,
I mean, I think the biggest shift was going from a well-known company that everyone wants to meet with to going to a tiny startup that's selling suitcases that no one wants to meet with. And most of my friends thought I was crazy. They were like, you're leaving Uber now that it's like super cool to go to this like God knows what company. And I think that just goes to show that for me, it's never been about being at the cool company. It's been about building the next cool company. The transition from service to product is super difficult. It's so different. You don't have endless opportunities for iteration. I mean, that's like the first thing. With Uber, we had very much the mentality that things are better done than perfect. Just, ship things fast, learn, iterate. You can't just ship a product fast and then have people walking around with broken suitcases.
Yeah, I don't want to be walking through the airport and my suitcase just breaks, my clothes are all over the airport now. Yeah.
So it was a very different sort of like, how do we become, a fast growth company like Uber, but with a certain level of quality that we can really put our name behind.
I want to shift gears now to talk about your new company that you've recently started. And I'm curious, you talked a lot about being curious about marketing, and personal growth obviously plays a big role in your story. But I'm curious, when did you decide, was it when you were at Away, or was it previous to that you wanted to sort of start something on your own, to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur before I knew what entrepreneurship was. So I come from a family that's very, my mom grew up Catholic, so very sort of like more old school. And my mom didn't have a career for herself. So when she would see my expensive taste, I had expensive taste even with like the butter I wanted on my toast.
Right,
Like
right.
super
Yeah.
silly. So my mom always told me, wow, you're going to have to marry rich one day. And she will never forget like 8-year-old Babba answering back being like, why do I need to marry rich? What about me just becoming rich? And she was like, whoa, okay. So I think I just always had this like desire to be in charge. And I feel like entrepreneurship was that natural sort of evolution for me of having a very strong personality, very opinionated, very vision driven. And it worked in companies like Uber where this sort of employment is entrepreneurial, but it was really hard for me in more sort of corporate settings. So I always said to myself that after Uber, I was going to go and do my own company. And then I kept getting sidetracked. Like I met the founders at Away and that opportunity just sounded so incredible and I jumped in it and it was really fun to get the opportunity to build again. But I think it was during my time at Away that I just hit a moment where I just had to ask myself, what am I really waiting for? And I realized that I did not have another sort of 5 years in me of building someone else's company. And
Yeah, you want to do it for yourself that time.
Yeah. I decided to just, take a leap of faith and decided that there is no such thing as good timing. You just have to make the timing.
And then ByBabba was created. I'm curious, tell us a bit about what the reason you started ByBabba in the first place. And then, as you sort of reflect back on your time building ByBabba, what are some of the major things? Like, what are some of the big things that maybe you're surprised to learn along the way?
So ByBabba was built from just like my personal experience at Uber and Away, where I felt like I was really good with fast-paced companies and creating marketing strategies that really cut through the noise in a fast-paced environment. And we were always so unhappy with our agency partners, especially in PR and marketing. So I just felt like there's got to be a way for a more modern day agency model. And the reason I ended up on the sort of agency side of things was also because I, at the time, actually didn't have any capital to start a company. And an agency model felt like what was doable with my resources at the time.
Asset light kind of thing.
Yeah, all you need is a laptop. And I think I stole Carl's laptop. I didn't even have like money to buy my own laptop at the time. So I just like borrowed his ones and started the company. And initially it was just me, and then eventually grew into an agency with an office in New York, one in Sweden. And we had a team of 15 people and working with some really cool direct-to-consumer brands like Glossier and Ritual and Bumble. And I think that was when I realized that okay, I have achieved like something that I could only have dreamt of a couple of years ago, but I'm still not fulfilled.
Still not satisfied.
Exactly. I still feel like this incredible itch that I want to build something. And that's when I decided that, and also I had a different financial situation at that time and had the sort of privilege to, put some of my own capital into starting something of my own. And that's when I decided I wanted to do a direct-to-consumer brand myself.
So 6 months ago, in the middle of a pandemic, no less, you pivoted your business and launched Ceremonia. And again, going from a service-based business to a product-based business, and now you decide you want to do this for yourself. ByBabba, you're being somewhat modest, but ByBabba was really, at its prime, this amazing, different agency that incredible brands would use to figure out a way to use your term, which I love, which is to cut through the noise, to get attention, to storytell what they were doing. You have this great job, a great company with ByBabba, and you're getting all these clients that are coming to see you and paying you lots of money to help them cut through the noise. And then the pandemic hits and you decide, hey, it's time to start my own direct-to-consumer brand. Why?
Yeah, so I had started working on Ceremonia before, and I think the pandemic actually accelerated it. Because before the pandemic, it was this like side thing I was doing on the side of the agency. I would sometimes use sort of leftover capacity of the team I had at the agency to help do research or, help build the foundation for what will become Ceremonia. At the time, we called it Project X. So Ceremonia was for the longest time Project X inside of ByBabba. And then when the pandemic hit, it became clear to me that I only have like one bucket of energy, and if I decide to put it on many things, I'm gonna be mediocre at many things. But if I decide to put my entire bucket of energy in one thing, I can be extraordinary in one thing. And I think that's when I made the tough call to close down my agency business, or at least start preparing for a closure of the agency business in order to dedicate myself fully to this new venture. And I'm very much an all-in person. Like, I think you will hear about founder stories from people who, before they quit the job, they already started selling and they had, all this like security lined up, and then that's when they quit their job. I am very much an all-in type of person, and I'm pretty fearless with that. I grew up poor, so for me to be poor again is not like the biggest scare. Like, I know I know how to work in a restaurant. I know how to do the dishes. That worst case scenario doesn't scare me. I've been there, I've done it. I can grow from that again. For me, I didn't want to optimize for a plan B. I wanted to optimize for plan A.
Now, the other part, of course, is because you feel like you have one bucket of energy and you want to direct it to one thing so that you don't sort of spray and pray, or that you spread it out like peanut butter in a way that it's all kind of mediocre. You decided to go deep on this brand, Ceremonia. Tell us a bit about the brand and why you think that was missing in the market.
So Ceremonia is a clean hair care brand that's rooted in Latin heritage, and I am a Swedish Latina myself. So what that means is I grew up in Sweden, but actually both my parents are from Chile. So I'm 100% Latin, but I also feel very Swedish. Mm-hmm. And I never saw myself represented in any setting, like not in a business setting, and not in the products that I consumed. And upon moving to the US, I was sort of so happily surprised by the amount of Latinas that I would meet that were just like me. They were, these sort of double cultural ladies who were doing awesome things and just happened to also be Latins. After doing some research, I realized that in the US, 20% of the population are Hispanics. Isn't that amazing? Like every fifth person is actually Hispanic.
Wow.
And what's really exciting is that the Hispanic demographic in the US, it's one of the youngest ones. So the median age is 27. It's the youngest demographic here. And we're the biggest minority. And yet there are no big brands that are either founded by us or created with our sort of culture in mind. So I just thought that was sort of crazy, and especially after coming from the agency side, where I got to see new direct-to-consumer brands launching every day, and they were all targeting the same white millennial.
Right.
A super crowded
space.
And
even if they were targeting Latinas, I mean, it was sort of an artificial kind of targeting, right? It was like, it's same product, different label or something.
Totally. Or like, let's just, put Eva Longoria on an ad and call it a day. Right. So I wanted to create something that my younger self would feel proud of, and something that would help to empower the future generation of the Latinx community in the US. So before I even knew it was going to be a hair care brand, I knew it was going to be something that was there to empower the future generation of Latinx. And I landed on hair for two reasons. One being that Latinas are obsessed with hair. Like, I'm obsessed with hair, and so is my entire family. We actually spend, like, as Latinas in the US, spend 46% more on hair care products than non-Hispanics. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. Yeah.
And yet there's like no go-to brand that sort of speaks that language. And then the other reason is that the beauty category has seen a lot of development over the past decade. We are moving towards a green, clean beauty trend, and that's sort of becoming the default. However, very little has happened in that category when it comes to hair. Mm-hmm. My skincare routine is fully clean and green. Same thing with makeup and even fragrance and even like your detergent. However, when it comes to hair care, it's still extremely behind, and very much led by either you go all natural at the natural store with like a lavender scent, or it's the salon brands that are filled with toxins, but they look cool and are sort of like nicely branded. So,
you sort of have to choose like, mediocre product, but good for the environment, or like better product, but not very good for the environment.
Yeah. Or not even good for you, but
or not good for you is,
exactly.
That's right.
But it makes your hair look good for the day, but it doesn't do anything for it. So with Ceremonia, we wanted to create the sort of the future of clean hair care, like the very best of clean hair care that isn't only good for the environment and you, but that is also making your hair better. So all our formulas are silicone-free, sulfate-free, paraben-free, and we actually follow the European guidelines, which means that we have banned 3,000 ingredients that are actually very commonly found in the US. So that's something that's
so you're sort of taking a higher standard from a different geography, even though you don't have to.
Exactly. And I think
Right.
that's something that's interesting for people in the US to know, is that the EU bans 3,000 ingredients. The US only bans 30. So
crazy.
it puts a lot of responsibility on the consumer, and I think that's too much to ask for, and I think brands should take that responsibility on themselves.
Are there any learnings from your experience that you can share with us and the viewers today about starting a business probably in one of the most tense environments in sort of business history?
I think that the flip side of that is that consumers are very empathetic, and they want to put their dollars where their sort of like values are. So I think to be a small business or a value-driven business, this is the time to really communicate those values. And we have seen how almost every time we get tagged in an Instagram post, even when it's like a white girl buying our products, because our products are for all hair types, so they're not necessarily just for Latinas, but even like our white consumers, they love to be a good ally to a sort of brand that's founded by women of color. And we get a shout out for that almost every time they tag us, and they're like, oh, this amazing, hair oil, and it's founded by women of color or Latina founded business. So I think that
it's a vote with it. They're sort of voting with their wallets for you to exist.
Yeah, totally.
And support
and
you.
I think as a business, sometimes we take those values for granted, but I think really communicating that and leaning on your community. We created during the pandemic insider community that we call. We use an app called Geneva. And in this app, we host, I think we have about 150 Latinas now who are part of our insider panel, and they get pre-access to things. We, share with them our launches. They help spread the word. They create content with us. They are part of testing new formulations. So I think just like lean into your community and be vocal about what you stand for as a brand.
Yeah, you sort of completely blur the line there of who is a consumer and who's part of the brand itself, and you kind of mix it all together.
I mean, I love that. That's how I like to do business. I am extremely community driven. I think that's the best part about my job, is when I really feel like we're co-creating with the people that really care.
Yeah, I love that. Two last questions before I let you go here. Obviously, Alma was born 8 months ago, 10 months ago?
5
months ago. Wow.
Yeah, she was born a week before Ceremonia was launched.
5 months ago. I have 2 daughters, as you know, and Lindsay and I, my wife and I, are both entrepreneurs as well. And I'm curious, has being a parent changed your outlook on entrepreneurship at all?
It's made me very grateful to be able to really design my life. I think especially as a new mom, it's really hard to know what you need ahead of time. It's really hard to plan. So I've been extremely grateful that I've been able to really play it week by week. And like the downside is that I don't have any maternity leave, but the sort of positive outcome from that is that I get to decide. I actually don't start my days until 10 a.m., which means I get from 5 a.m. to 10, just like undisrupted, quality time with my baby in the morning. So then I go to work feeling like I already like filled that bucket, and I feel extremely energized. And also being able to take breaks throughout the day now with this work from home situation. I work longer days than my husband, but I take more breaks throughout the day. So I will take, an hour break to take Alma on a walk, but then I will take a meeting at 8 p.m. So, you have to like just design it for how it works for you. And I think that's the biggest blessing of this weird time for me.
Yeah, I mean, Alma growing up in a house with both you and Carl, who are both incredibly successful and inspiring entrepreneurs. I always think about, for Bailey and Zoe, our daughters, them growing up with watching Lindsay and I, build and run our businesses and how that's going to affect them. And of course, I'd love my kids to become entrepreneurs as well. But what I actually realize more and more is that I think the benefit of that is that the influence of watching entrepreneurs, growing up with entrepreneurs, or growing up with people that are very hardworking for that matter, in itself, I think is going to be incredibly instrumental. So they know that, hey, when they see a problem, there is the obvious way to solve the problem, but there's also, if you don't like that solution, you can invent new solutions to that same problem.
100%.
And I think that in itself is so fascinating for children to grow up and be influenced by.
Totally. I think being an independent thinker is like so liberating, because it means that you don't have to just obey by the structures that were created by someone else. You can be part of creating them in a way that you think will will suit you better. And I have certainly done that in my career, and it doesn't work at every company, but you also don't need to work at every company. So I think learning to listen to your instinct and your gut and finding the company or the project that really fits with your personality.
That's amazing. All right, last question, something that I always like to ask all our guests. What is some advice that you would give to young entrepreneurs who are just getting started, who want to be the next Babba, who want to create the next Ceremonia, who are looking to, get a job at the next Uber or Away? What's some advice you would give to them?
Realizing that there is, for entrepreneurship, there's no good timing. You just create the timing. And I think life really happens when we're busy making plans. So, if you have an idea that you feel passionate about, just do it. Like, what is the biggest step you can take towards that dream today? In terms of just career in general, I think taking every experience as a learning, even when you're in a place that's miserable or your boss is horrible or whatever, like, just ask yourself, what can you learn from that experience? And I'm very spiritual, and I always like to, think about the fact that the universe has brought me this experience to my life as a teaching moment. And it's just extremely empowering when you see life through that lens, because nothing ever feels like a waste. There is nothing in my life I would change. Although I've had some really miserable experiences, but I really feel like they were all instrumental in bringing me where I am today.
Wow, that's awesome. I totally agree with you. I think that it's so easy for us to lament the things that are happening to us that we don't like. But if you use the lens of, well, okay, what can I take away from this? How can I grow through this experience? That was for me practicing law as a lawyer. I hated being a lawyer, but I what it did for me was it reminded me how much I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so every day sitting in that law firm, working with people that I didn't necessarily get along with and didn't feel like I was necessarily learning from in the practice of law, I was like, oh, wow, this is, again, just another jolt in my entrepreneurial bucket, that this is entrepreneurship is what I want to do the rest of my life.
I love that. Also, I cannot see you in a law firm.
Yeah, I know. They don't really like the hoodies and stuff either. Babba, thank you so much for spending some time with me. Thanks so much for sharing these amazing stories and these anecdotes with our viewers. And I'm very grateful that you joined us on The Life of Rebel.
Yeah,
today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.